Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Friday, the last day of the week. It is also the last day of the month of January. And you are watching and listening to Inside the Game here on the National Soccer Network. Jonathan Turner alongside Mr. Nathan Wangler. It is Friday, last day of the week, last day of the month. And we have a good show for you here today. As we are excited to welcome back in Peter as well as Jimmy here on this Friday morning. Good to have everybody along for the ride today. First time stopping by, hit that subscribe button, like us, share this with your friends and family, and come back for more each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. And Mr. Wangler, how was your Thursday afternoon?
It was good. It was really good. I had the chance to go stop down at the Breslin last night, which is, for those of you who are listening who are not in the state of Michigan, it's kind of the mecca, at least when it comes to basketball in this state. I know we used to have, obviously, the Palace at Auburn Hills, and that kind of felt like the mecca for a while because that place had obviously had a lot of character, and that was the most disappointing part of me being a Detroit sports fan was watching the Pistons move into Little Caesars Arena. I guess the Red Wings too. Joe Louis was legendary in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people remember it that way. So just seeing the shell of it now, which I don't know if they've completely knocked all of it down, but at least the last time I was in downtown, well, maybe not the last time, but a couple of times ago when I was in downtown Detroit, it was just a big shell of it now. You know, the Breslin is kind of the mecca in terms of, basketball. And obviously they have the high school state championships and everything there. So I actually have not a mutual connection, but it was someone that who's oddly enough worked with a lot of the same people that I've worked with, and someone that is actually really close friends with some of my close friends. So Dalton Shetler, who's the voice of their women's basketball program, I got in contact with him, and I was just like, hey, part of this whole networking thing that you and I talked about on a previous episode is like, if there's a chance, at the end of our conversation initially, I'm like, I'd love to come down and just shadow you, just see, how things are done, on that level on a game day, what it looks like. And honestly, it looks a lot like what you guys do at Oakland. There's a few little differences here or there. They do some things differently. Now, mind you, you're on TV, they're on radio. So that's obviously the key difference. So there's, obviously little things there that are going to look and sound a little bit different than what they do at MSU. But it was, when I got there early enough to where he could kind of take me on a tour around the facilities. And that was the coolest part. I mean, even born and raised as in a Michigan family, there's obviously a lot of history in that building. So going through the practice facilities, I got to see their 2 actual national titles. They have replicas when you walk into the building that you can see, but I saw the real deal. So just saying. But I got to see the practice facilities. I got to walk down on the court. I actually saw Lexi Ayala, which I know is someone that you work with pretty closely. I think she was on the production side that night because I saw her wrapping up cords and doing stuff like that. So it was a really, really fun experience. They took on Oregon. They kind of laid an egg, but that wasn't really the point of why I was there. So a really, really cool experience though. And that's the highest level. So just getting more experience and seeing how they do stuff. So that was really fun. So my Thursday was solid. What about you?
Yeah, so we had an Oakland men's basketball game last night, and had a chance to watch Green Bay come into town. And for those of you that don't know who the Green Bay Phoenix are, they're a men's basketball program based out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and their head basketball coach is none other than Doug Gottlieb. So Doug Gottlieb, who has been a staple in the sports radio kind of world for probably the last 2 decades. I believe this is his first ever head coaching gig ever.
Yes. Yep.
He is currently 0-12 in the conference and 2 and 21 overall in his first season.
Yeah.
I've had a chance as part of my role at Oakland, both as a commentator and now on the production side as the production company in charge of those games. I've had a chance to listen and see up close and personal just about everything that goes on in that environment. I will tell you, I don't know much about Doug Gottlieb. He could be the most stand-up guy in the world. He could have a lot of whatever. He doesn't seem, at least from my perspective, to seem to know what he's really doing. Now, being that he is a first coach, you throw those things in there, and I don't want to get into like this guy's a bad coach. To be fair, I mean records speak for themselves, but you got 9 freshmen, you got a bunch of newcomers. I mean, you're gonna struggle in a league where veteran leadership is really what is out there. So I get you're gonna struggle in that environment. It's just watching him last night, just literally just watching him for a moment. He just looked all over the place.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting there with a clipboard and you are literally over the course of about 30 seconds writing something down, wiping it away, writing it down, wiping it away. I mean, you're doing that, a lot, and so.
Yeah.
I don't know
Well,
what
and
to make of it, but
just because you were a good player doesn't mean you're automatically going to transition to be a good coach or a good front office person too. I mean, that's kind of the thing we deal with in sports sometimes. And I realize it's his first year; he's got a lot to figure out. And obviously, Green Bay is not in terms of historical relevance. I mean, I know they probably made the tournament a couple of times, but it's not like. So he's got a lot to figure out. And college recruiting, it's all encompassing, and some coaches like that. But you're dealing with kids. You're not dealing with pros. So it's a little bit different. It's less about, I feel like, the X's and O's and more about the Jimmys and Joes, if you will, and being able to manage personalities and recruit well and getting kids to come play at Green Bay and stuff like that. So there's a lot to figure out. But obviously he was a great player back in the day, and I was kind of surprised he got back into coaching because he was actually a pretty regular member of the national media when it came to basketball. I mean, he was a frequent flyer a lot of times on Colin Cowherd's show, and that was one that I always listened to, at least, driving over to Detroit to do stuff with you guys and whatnot. I listened to the Herd all the time. So I was a little surprised that he stepped away from the media. But, yeah, I mean, for players, there's just a certain itch to just get back, into the action or not on the field, on the court, in the locker room. There's a lot of guys like that. And I see that with some of the former players, especially NFL players who are on TV and radio now. It's like they like the position they're in, but they miss being on the sidelines. They miss kind of being in the action. So it doesn't, it kind of makes sense why he would want to get into that spot. But he's got a lot to figure out, and I think he's had to learn that lesson the hard way. I mean, I remember his interview before the Michigan Tech game, complaining about how he wants bigger and better matchups, and you shouldn't have a nobody coming into their building in the middle of winter to play them. And it actually turned out to be Nobody Tech who beat them. So he's got a lot to figure out for sure in year number 1.
Yeah, and obviously being that he is someone that's been used to using, his voice like we do, to start stuff, right, in the world, right? That's if you're a media personnel, your job is really to be a disruptor, right? That's your job, right? It's to create narratives that would allow people to either like you or hate you. It's there's really not like, that's what it's designed for, right? That's his job. His job is to say, well, people are going to love him for what his opinion is, and people are going to hate him for his opinion is. That's really kind of how that works. It's designed to be that way. And I'm not saying there are people that don't kind of fall in the middle there, but to be fair, that's what it's for. So he's used to doing that. So now he's trying to figure out a way to manage that in his new coaching role, right? And you've got to be more careful as a coach with that, because everything you say is under a microscope. Not to say that everything he was saying before as a broadcaster was under a microscope, but it's not the same thing. Now he has to get a whole locker room to respect what he's doing. And I know we want to get into a conversation today about a number of other things, and I know that we talk about this as a soccer show. it's called Inside the Game. So whether we talk about the soccer environment, we're talking about a coach right now, and and kind of how these new coaches, how you can that transition from not being a coach into being a coach, what that even looks like. I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience that the players in the locker room on your team, they're the ones that have to buy into you. Now, you might not have anything that they perceive to be valuable based on experience. Because again, think of it this way: when Dan Cable walked into the Detroit Lions many years ago, now it's 4 years ago, right? And said we're gonna bite off kneecaps. The locker room did not quite really know how Dan Campbell was going to coach them. It took a few weeks, maybe even months for the team to kind of come together, go, oh, okay, we like this guy, right? And then over time, it built. Part of that too, while that process is happening, okay, we like him, but how is his X's and O's? How is the way he's doing things? How is that going to help us on the field, right? So then they have to start buying into the philosophy of what he's doing and the process and all that. So it's not just about, oh, I like the guy. Do I believe in the guy, right?
Mhm.
And that's another factor, right? If Bill Belichick walked into the Lions locker room in 4 years ago as a new head coach, there's not a person in that room that would have been like, okay, yeah, we like Bill Belichick. We believe in him. He's been doing this for 20. He's got like 9 Super Bowl champions. We believe in that guy, right?
Mhm.
You've got Mike Krzyzewski walks into Green Bay and says, "I'm taking that job." That entire locker room believes in Mike Krzyzewski. It's like it's a no brainer, right? So
Mhm.
Doug Gottlieb's walking in, and the entire locker room is kind of like, "What are we doing here? Like, what am I getting out of it?" Most of them might not even heard the guy before. To be fair, right? They might not even, who knows if they had heard him. So here you got a
Mhm.
coach who's never coached before coming into your world, and now you have to buy into, not only do you like the guy, but into his philosophies, his process, and all the things go along with it. So
Right.
there's a lot that goes into that. And so
Right.
in this first year, I would imagine that nobody in that locker room believes in what he's doing. And it's not because they don't like him, whatever, but because, again, it hasn't yet paid off. And will that change? Of course it will. So if next year they go into it, they win a couple games here towards the end of the season, they kind of get on a roll, then they can start to buy into it a little bit. Okay, we can see the light now. But right now there's no light. They haven't won in the league, and they're currently 2-21. So that entire locker room probably on some level does not believe in Doug Gottlieb on some level.
Mhm.
And now
Well,
it's
and
just
he
a matter.
yeah. Well, and he has to figure it out too. Yeah, like and someone who played, I'd say back in the day. It's funny you always throw around that term back in the day. Like, what's the day now? I guess the '90s were the day if we're talking about it, like that. But he also has to figure out how the game has changed, and I find that tough because when you have players or athletes who played, a decade and a half, 2 decades ago, the college athlete now, and you and I chatted about this in length, the college athlete now, or just the athlete now in general, especially in the game of basketball, is far different than what they were those decade and a half, 2 decades ago. I mean, you just look on social media, overtime, the media outlet. I feel like in a lot of ways they've ruined the way the game of basketball has been played in the United States. And I was actually watching this interesting interview last night. It was Gio Ariema, UConn's infamous, not infamous, famous rather, head coach, women's head coach, who will go obviously into the Hall of Fame and has the most wins ever in that, in the NCAA on the women's side. Talked about how he can't watch young kids play the game anymore. He can't go to these AAU tournaments. He can't do it because the focus is no longer on the game itself. It's on the highlight tapes. We like I said, we got fifth graders who got highlight tapes out there. It's on the parents who are yelling and screaming and getting into squabbles, and it's at the coaches who are less interested about teaching the game and more interested about being the kid's hype man. It's just the culture around the game has changed so much. And so I see Doug Gottlieb and the fact that he played a while ago and he came up in a different generation of basketball athletes who, by the way, were not as athletic, not as skilled, but more, I guess, disciplined, more reliant on good coaching. that's not really the case anymore. And I would even argue at schools like Green Bay, it's still Division I. You're going to get a lot of kids who have gone through that AAU realm, who you almost kind of have to break down and reteach at the college level, which is just it's nuts to me. And even in the games that I broadcast sometimes and watching some of the schools we play against, I'm like, that the way they play might work well in a YMCA. It might work really well in a YMCA. It's not going to work well in an organized basketball game. When I see a kid try to do a crossover step back down 8, in the first quarter, it's like that right there is the way American basketball at the youth level has been for a while. So I think for Doug Gottlieb, it's also just figuring out how to coach the new era, the new wave of athletes, because it's a lot different. And you and I have talked about this. It's a lot different now than maybe what it used to be.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's talk about what we're going to get into here today. We talked about this yesterday, and it was your idea. And so I think you called it Film Review Friday or something along those lines.
Film Room Friday.
Film Room Friday. So I'd like for you to explain what this is, because to be fair, I don't know if I truly understand what it is. So let's get into it.
I tried explaining it yesterday, but here it is. So, and I'll share my screen in a little bit. I actually have one thing that I wanted to show you. And JT, if you have any calls that you wanted to show, now this could be, and I think I had an idea, by the way, for one for you. And I'll see if you can remember the specific one that I'm talking about. I'll try to hint at it without actually talking about it. Okay. And I'm not saying this one because I want to put you on the spot. I'm saying this one because I feel like it would be a good lesson, because we've heard a lot of your good calls. Do you have that one call? Do you know the one I'm talking about, state championship? It was one of the last goals of the day. I forget. I think it was the D1 game. You had a little incident. Your goal scoring call. We were at the restaurant after the game, chopping it up and having a good laugh about that one. So I think that one would be a funny one to show. I got a couple of them here, but the point of this segment, and this is something that I've tried to do just to try to explain it before we get into it. On my TikTok page, and again, I've talked about how that's kind of like my main in terms of marketing tools. That's kind of my main one. And a lot of times I've been doing what I call the broadcaster's film room. So I'll show my work, I'll show what I do, and then I'll just kind of pick it apart. You know what I mean? What I like, what I don't like, what could have been better here or there. And I think it's only important because obviously we are both broadcasters. We are both media personalities. So I think it would be nice to give you guys kind of a look behind the curtain at us as play-by-play broadcasters, and what we liked and what we didn't like, and just kind of going through some of our calls that we've made either in this sport or around sports that we like and don't like. The first one I wanted to start off with on my end, and we talked about yesterday how it wasn't. What's that?
I said I ended up finding that one you were talking about.
Oh no, here you go. No, yeah, go ahead. So,
I just don't. What I don't know though is you said it was a goal call.
Yeah, so I forget if it was
for the Bulldogs in this game, up 6 semifinal.
Let's. I think it was.
It might have been right before that one.
Troy High lost.
Sorry, let's.
Oh boy.
Inside.
I know, right? It's like
Very defensive minded.
No, this game was a pretty exciting one, though.
Yeah, that's kind of cool how we ended up doing this too.
It's got to be coming up here pretty soon.
So ball up that far side.
Oh yeah, here we go.
One back by the Bulldogs. Plays it inside into Allen. He'll play it out wide here. Up this near side to Castro. One back by the Highlanders. Lilla. He has the ball at his feet. Lilla takes on the defenders, finds Donato. Donato turns. Donato now on his right foot. Now Donato!
Rochester Evans.
Did you see me smiling at you in the the background too. I don't know if you looked over and saw me afterwards.
You can't run, you can't hide. You just have to hope that maybe they have an off night. You get a couple.
I thoroughly enjoyed those games, like the whole weekend. I mean, because that whole Saturday, because I mean, like the energy, you know, the cameras on us for all 4 games.
Rarely do they sail their opportunities. If anything, they're going to play it on the ground, and they played that one perfectly. Donato back towards that far
But if you
post
noticed,
on a difficult angle,
the really
to take
cool
that
thing about
shot.
that is that
Money,
we
as he's been all
let
year.
that breathe so much.
Donato getting his 6th goal of the season. The Highlanders now have a 2-0 lead.
I mean,
Keeper and Philo.
we let it breathe, man.
The odds-on favorite to
Oh, here we go.
over midfield. This ball is played back up over midfield, settled down now by Rosine. He slots one up, and now here comes the Highlanders. A shot from Page!
Rochester Adams.
Again, just letting it breathe.
Alex Rosine receives the ball, finds a running on Anthony Page, puts it home past Luke Philo. It's 1-0.
And you have the energy, you have everything else. So that's why silence is so important, because you're giving the people consuming a chance to celebrate. And that's like one of the more exciting things that you want to hear on a broadcast, because again, it makes you kind of feel like you're there, right? You can feel all the energy of the people around you. It's almost like you're in the crowd high-fiving and doing all that stuff. The one thing I wanted to mention in that sequence, and again, not to bury you, just to talk about it, but one of the hardest things that we're always trying to figure out, I guess, as play-by-play personalities, is where is our register? How far can we take it without cracking? And the tough thing that we always go back to, you and me, is that sometimes with the way our business works, we are going to have a string of games all on one day. I mean, that's what's coming up for me in February. That's what's coming up for a lot of guys. You're going to have 2 games. And so what makes that really hard is that voice-wise, it's going to start to –
aiding all the parents and family and 2 years, 21-10-9 overall in his 2 years at the.
And so when you get to that point, it's really hard. And I kind of had a conversation with Noah Drury about this. And my whole thing was, because I know that sometimes when he calls games and he calls big moments, sometimes he wants to just keep going up. And I told him, don't be afraid, especially when you're in a moment like that. And, you know, broadcasters or any media, anybody that wants to do this, be open to either punching out or punching down. The analogy I always heard was, you don't always have to go up, right? You can get the point across without having to go quite to that next level to where you're cracking. Because we talked about how, you know, voice quality is always a good thing. So one thing I've been trying to work on is, as opposed to going up in levels, if I'm ever feeling raspy or at that point late in the game, it's okay to go down a level too and still get the point across and still keep that energy. Like, you don't want to take the energy away, but there's a way of doing that without cracking. So it's a tough thing to balance, but I just thought that was an interesting one, because I know you and I had some talks after the game and obviously looked back and laughed at it. And things like that are going to happen. Like, they're inevitable, especially on a day like that. So,
well, I think it's important too. I think it's important too, because perspective wise, right? So that was game 4 of that day. Here is like game 1, goal call 1, right? From that day, right?
To Noel. Now DeYoung out that far side now for Bonema. Bonema now. Look at Bonema! The Warriors break free with 1 minute to go.
Western Michigan Christian.
Boom. So, like, obviously, my register still got pretty loud. But again, the moment, right? If I look at that moment, you're talking about it being 0-0. This is an 80-minute game. This is not a 90-minute game. This is a high school game. It's an 80-minute game. And for a state championship, Bonema scores the goal with under a minute to go in regulation. This game was destined for overtime, 0-0. And I mean, to be fair, I don't think anyone gave a shit if my voice was going to crackle or go off the register, because in that moment, and if you notice,
Yeah.
I continued after he scored, right, to explain the moment for what it was. You don't typically, yeah, sometimes you do that, but in that moment specifically, I had no choice. You're talking about, I mean, the biggest moment in that person's life ever. So, trying to get that.
No, you're right. No, and and that's the thing. Like, there are times where it is acceptable, and I've even heard the greats, slight voice cracks. Well, one notable example, and you'll remember this, not a soccer related one, but you remember the Michigan State, the trouble with the snap play, that whole
Oh my
thing?
God, yes.
Yeah, so that the broadcaster, and I forget his name off the top of my head, used to do a lot of Big Ten Network games. His voice cracked.
He was also ESPN Monday Night Football guy for a minute too.
Yeah, if you listen back to that play, his voice cracked a lot. But because of how crazy and how nutty and how weird of a play that was to end a football game, a lot of people are willing to be like, okay, you know what? We'll give that one the green light. That's perfectly fine, because you were able to really package that moment, and your voice cracking is fine, because everybody was really in a state of delirium at that point. You know what I mean? You weren't the only one as the broadcaster. So it's important to not do that consistently, and I think everyone will tell you that. Like, it's okay to get away with it once in a while, especially in big moments like this. But you didn't. I wouldn't say you cracked. Not in this situation, but it is okay to happen for once in a while. Another one I wanted to talk about, though, JT, and I know you mentioned it in the past, and I'm actually going to pull up a video of it if I can find it here, is the national championship call from the NCAA this year, when Vermont was able to win the national title. Because I know there's been a lot of dialogue around that call. Good, bad, or indifferent. I just think people have different – oh, boy. I think people have different opinions on whether it was a good call, whether it was a bad call. So I kind of wanted to get your opinion on that one too. But let me see if I can find the video.
I got it right here. Golden
You
goal.
Do? Oh, okay.
Holmes. Picked off by Barrett. Well read. And the center back will blast it long and ask Kissel to get in a foot race with Bamford. Kissel may win, and he does! Can he win the national championship? 1v1 against Yannick! Oh my gosh, they do it! Don't call them Cinderella! You can call them national champs! For the first time ever!
So I'll let you get your opinions in. I can obviously share what I think of this play. I like that image right there. That's a good image. That's a good job by that camera person getting that shot. But what do you think about this call? What do you take away from what you just saw here?
I like the authenticity of it, right? I really do. I think that if you're a viewer at home who's not used to hearing soccer games, I think this is a home run in that regard. I don't know if I like someone narrating what the outcome could be prior to the outcome happening. That's the one area I have and struggle with, because he's setting this thing up, and if this guy misses the goal, misses it, you know what I mean? I feel like just explain the moment. Obviously, there's a magnitude that goes along with it. There's, if the goal does go in, it means this game's over with and they win a national championship. So I struggle with kind of teeing up what the moment really was. You know what I mean? I feel like it because if it doesn't go that way, because the way his voice was cracking, right? The way that he was so excited, you know what I mean? And I feel like this, by the way, Mike Patrick was the one that called the game, Michigan versus Michigan State. It was Mike Patrick was the voice. His voice did not crack, I think, until he got into the end zone. Right. But he, you know what I mean? Like, we can watch that one for comparison. That's the only thing I would say about this one. I don't hate the call. I think it's going to go down as probably one of the more memorable ones in NCAA history. I just don't know if it. I don't know. I feel like as you narrated the ending, that I think is going to have on some impact. It's going to hurt it long term. That's just my perception. And again, there's a reason we have a comment section here. If you don't agree with us, by all means, put it in here. Let us know your thoughts about that call or any call for that matter. My thoughts are I feel like he narrated too much of it going into the goal, and he could have done a lot of that, in another moment.
It's always important to remember, like, one person's critiques is not the same for everybody. And that's the same if you ever go to look for advice on this, that, or the other thing, right? You're going to get different opinions on different stuff. And that was actually something I talked about last night with Dalton Shetler. We were actually talking about, he actually wanted to hear what I thought about his broadcast. And I'm like, listen, I can tell you this, that, or the other thing. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the same for every broadcaster you talk to. On that, I'm actually going to disagree with you. I loved the fact that he set the table before that ball went in. And the truth is you're going to look like an idiot when you do it. And the reason I know that is because in baseball, setting the table is very important. So-and-so has an opportunity to win it on a walk-off here. If they strike out, that's not you who looks like an idiot. That's a player who didn't capitalize. But setting the table is very important because it gets people interested. Like, oh, like this could be the moment right here. I think it's really important in basketball. What's at stake on this possession when a team takes back over? Okay, opportunity for this player to match their career high, or an opportunity for them to take the lead. Set the table. What's at stake on this one? So for him to have the wherewithal in that tight window. And now, mind you, his vocal quality, that was one thing that I didn't really like, because he went from 0 to a million really quick. So I feel like there was an opportunity to climb that ladder a little bit more slowly. But I think he was just so excited that's why he really went to the top of his register, but then went beyond that. I'll talk on that here in a second. But I really like the fact that he's like, has the ball, opportunity to win a national championship. Like, it's right here. So I don't think that makes him look like an idiot as much as it would make the player himself if he missed out on that opportunity.
Did I say that he? Did I say that he?
No.
Okay.
You said you didn't like it, but I'm just saying, from my perspective and from what I've gathered a lot, setting the table is something that can make for a really good call. Now, he went too high too fast, but the other thing is, and we always look at it this way, like, if you want to look at it like as a gear shifter, right? Imagine you have like 1 through 5, right? 5 are your championship calls. 5 is like, that's the big stuff, conference championship, divisional championship, whatever. 1 is just like your talking volume. 2 is kind of like cruising altitude. That's kind of like what we're doing right now. You can go up to a 6 select times in your career. Like, there are only a few, maybe handful of times in your career where you can crank that thing all the way up to a 6. This would be one of them. First national championship in school history, period. Any sport, regardless, for Vermont. So he took this one up. He throttled it quite a bit. But in a moment like this, that's okay, in my opinion. That's perfectly fine to do. And the thing is he was able to really end it on a high note. So the way he finished it off with the words he used after the goal went in, and then here's my favorite part about this call, and this is why I was actually having a debate with one of my buddies after this championship call, because he had sent it to me, and he's like, we couldn't have anybody better call the game for the championship. I'm like, first of all, I think it's a great call. Is it perfect? No, I don't think any call is perfect. But what I will say, the way he ends it, in the letting the crowd and everybody kind of have their moment after it goes in, was in my mind very much a sign of a professional. In this shot right here, and I find it interesting that you paused it right here, and this is kind of the still shot that we've been conversating over since we watched the clip. This picture in front of us tells us a lot more than anything a broadcaster would in that moment. This Marshall kid, he got all the way to the championship. and then they make a defensive miscue, and all of a sudden it's in the back of the net, and they see their opportunity at doing what is really a once-in-a-lifetime thing as a player. Now, as a fan, you might see your team win a national championship at some point in your life, but as a player, really you only get one crack at this, unless you're playing football for Alabama when Nick Saban was there. Then maybe it's a little bit different. But you only have one chance. So the heartbreak that goes behind losing a game of this magnitude really can only be embodied by watching the people who actually just lost the game. So by seeing this kid, with his jersey over his head and his shorts and just laying there and just dismay at what just happened, for the broadcaster to be able to kind of take a back seat to this and go, this is the most important thing, I thought was a really, really good way of him closing it out. So, did he go too high too fast? Yes. Did he crack a little bit? Sure. But in a moment like this, it still wasn't all that bad. I've heard worse. I thought he packaged it up really well, and I still think it's going to go down as a really good call, and obviously something that these Vermont guys are going to want to look back on every day of their lives for the remainder of time. So, and something that defender is going to not want to look at ever for the remainder of his life. So it's I think it was if I want to rate it, if we're going to put it on like a letter scale here, I'll give it an A-, just simply because if he didn't crack in that moment, or if he climbed a little bit slower, I think he would have been okay. But everything else outside of that, I thought it was a solid call. But again, just my opinion on the matter.
Well, your opinion does not matter, Nathan. Just kidding. No, I mean, no, I don't disagree with you. I think that as part of this, we should also do Michigan versus MSU ending. I'm sure that this is gonna. Yeah, here it is. So this was 9 years ago. Think about
Get it
this.
out. Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. It's picked up by Michigan State. Jalen Watts Jackson, and he scores on the last play of the game. Unbelievable.
So
funny story about that kid. Actually, really funny story about that kid. So his name is Josh Ogdale. He actually went to my high school. Oh. I believe he was a grade below me, a grade 2 grades, something like that. But yeah, that's that's him. So that meeting kind of made him famous in the Twitter sphere. But yeah, that was a tough night. Goodness.
Again, obviously going to a 6, right? We talked about that and the adjustment in your voice. The thing that between those two calls, obviously Mike Patrick, professional, right? Long time, right? So he's got probably at this point, even in his career, he's got a long list of accolades as far as experience. I don't know the other person in the soccer game. Again, don't know who that was. Not that that matters. I don't care if you're a professional or not, or if you've been doing this for 100 years, it's your first big opportunity. It does not matter to me. And again, if I look back at that play, that call, I don't not. And I probably would agree with you as far as like the A-. I probably would put it there. I mean, I'm just saying that if I'm measuring that moment against other moments, because let's be honest, that's how we measure stuff, right? Where we talked about this moment, we talked about another moment. We're gonna be measuring. There's a measuring stick, right? And if we look at like an Al Michaels in 1980, right now, Al Michaels was still young in his career at that point, right? He was young. So, and the difference between when a goal goes in and when the game is coming to an end, right? And you're setting the tone for the game to come to an end. A lot of us actually have kind of in our brains scripted what we want to say when the game comes to an end, right? We kind of have this, okay, especially if we know that this moment is an iconic moment or a potential, whatever. We have kind of in our brains as play-by-play started to script out what we would want to say. And it's not always done like before the game. Sometimes I'm doing it in real time. Okay, we have a minute to go. This is the first time in the history of this program that they've ever had a state championship. So as this game is coming to an end, the whistle is being blown, I am saying for the first time in school history, right? I'm setting this thing. And again, so I'm just saying, if we're putting it in the measuring stick, regardless of who the person is, regardless of the event, if we're measuring it against other types of moments, I don't believe this specific moment would be a conversation piece for us to talk about from a play-by-play standpoint and would stand the test of time. It's a great moment. It's an iconic moment for Vermont, but I don't think it's going to rise to that level. That's my personal opinion, and so that's why. So that's why I'm saying, is it a good call? Yeah, it's a good call. It's authentic and it's raw, but it won't rise to any level that I think. You know what I mean? But this one, this moment here, right? Obviously, rivalry game, last minute. This one is up there as one of those ones that's going to be iconic because of the game, the meat, all that stuff. So I think this one actually on the measuring stick will make its way further up, because even though it was a middle of the season game, I think that really meant not a whole lot in the whole scheme of things. In the rivalry as a whole, this game will stand up more than that Vermont game will. And that's just my personal opinion on it. But again, I'm curious what people's thoughts are in the comments. If you're watching either on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you're watching, just you can comment on YouTube or on Facebook. I don't think you can comment where we can see it other than that. But I'm just curious, your thoughts on that aspect of this. But yeah, I mean, that's I know you have. Did you have one that you wanted us to hear you? I thought you said you might have one yourself.
I had a couple of them. The biggest thing for me, and this was just something that I had mentioned, and so I can just play a little bit of it. I don't know if I want to play necessarily the entire thing, but we talked about the importance of social media and being consistent with that and reaching out and marketing yourself and everything like that, and getting your business in the game. And obviously I've been doing more of that, and between building the studio and just trying to let people know about the show and doing a bunch of that stuff. And the tough thing is building a social media following, or following in general. It's like pushing a snowball uphill, because once you're able to get to the top, and it's the toughest to get to the top, you can just kind of push it down the hill, and then it'll just start rolling, and followers just kind of start piling on top of each other. And fortunately, I've gotten to that point now to where I have ways of just getting new followers routinely. But it used to be, I know we talked about you seeing me on TikTok initially when I was live streaming, but there was one very important thing that had to happen before that part even happened. And it was in West Michigan. And I'm going to say this just for everybody that's watching right now. You don't go viral on purpose. Let me just put it that way. No one goes viral on purpose. Now, there are some people that have resources that make it a lot easier to be able to post more videos and therefore potentially go viral. I'll give you that. But for the most part, you just catch lightning in a bottle. You happen to get the For You page right. The timing works out right. The video itself is just long enough to where it doesn't lose people's attentions and they're willing to pay attention to it. So this video, and it also ties into what we talk about, JT, with you and I, and I'm just trying to tee this thing up, but you and I talking about the importance of showing your personality through a broadcast. Listen, we just got way too much copy and paste in this industry right now. And listen, this is nothing against anybody that went to Syracuse, okay? But we call them sometimes the Syracuse clones in our business, because they all look the same, they all sound the same, they all walk the same, they all talk the same. You can take one and replace them with the other, and nobody would know the difference. And so one of the biggest things in West Michigan that we've been trying to get away from in order to create not just a better listening and viewing experience, but also help in our own professional lives, is do different stuff, right? So what's the biggest chief complaint in your mind, JT? If I were to just ask you, what's the biggest chief complaint about the sport of baseball?
Oh, it's boring.
Too slow. Yeah, it's too slow. Yeah, right. So the one sport that's comparable is golf, right? And so we cracked this idea a couple of years ago, and then again, this was before I even met you. What if we called an at-bat as if it was the Masters? And the Masters tournament was going on at the same exact time that our baseball game was going on. So we're like, that would be funny. And we obviously have sound effects, we have stuff we could do. So we're like, you know what? Let's do this. Tomorrow's a random weekend game. There's not going to be a lot of people here. It's going to be somewhat cold outside. Let's just tee this up and do it. Like, There's not a lot of other minor league broadcasters that would even think about doing anything remotely to this extent. And so I'm just going to play a little bit of this for you. And for what it's worth, this got, I believe it was over 9 million views on different social media platforms. Sports Illustrated, we got broadcasting moment of the year. The Daily Mail had a piece on us. My face was in the news over in the UK, believe it or not, once upon a time. So I'm going to play this video for you guys, but this is just kind of an example of you really have to lean into who you are as a broadcast personality in order to really separate yourself from the crowd, because it's a tough thing to do. So it's a little blurry, I think, on the screen right here. You got it?
Yep.
All right.
Hello, friends. A beautiful Saturday afternoon in Comstock Park. This is inning number 7. Still in the front 9, if you will.
You feel like you want to take a nap?
Eric Pinales hails from San Cristobal. It's about 30 kilometers from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. Right now looking at a pitch from about 60 feet, 6 inches.
See if I
No
can,
idea how that one stayed out.
the best part's coming up here. Oh, wait, hold on.
A fine hit, deep to left center. Off the wall. Lucas Dunn into second base. Exquisite. A 1-out double here in the 7th.
An excellent approach to that hit. Patient, able to line it up, deposit it into left center field.
Got it into the short grass out there.
So to put it blankly, we did not expect that to go as bonkers as it did. We were just having fun. And honestly, that's not the first time we've ever done a bit like that in our booth. We very much like to keep it loose. We very much like to be interactive and do different things. And so it just so happened that, number one, the camera angles were perfect. Production crew was perfect. The fact that they caught us laughing at each other was like, okay, they know this is a charade, but they're going to keep doing it because it's funny. Obviously, the commentary was good. The music was good. And the double was the cherry on top. If that didn't happen, I don't know how that bit would have gone, because we could have used that one. Everything timing-wise worked out. And then we posted it. And then all of a sudden I look at my phone and it's got 49,000 views in what felt like 10 minutes. So you have to, again, this is why it's so important. And you might be frustrated. You're like, well, why is no one following? Why is no one paying attention? They will. You just have to find a way to get that one clip out there, or maybe those 2 clips out there that generate a little bit more mojo than the rest of them, and you'll get there. But sometimes it's a waiting game. But I just thought that was interesting to put out there, because I know you've talked in length a lot in a lot of conversations we've had about the importance of you got to be you, right? You got to be you on the broadcast. And that doesn't mean you have to be a comedian, right? No one's asking for Jim Carrey to do play-by-play games, right? But you have to find a way to connect with people by just being yourself. And there's no shame in that, right? Stop trying to sound like every other broadcaster ever. You got to be you. So that's at least my perspective on this. And that was a wild experience to go through.
Yeah, I think it was great. Obviously we haven't had that kind of response to the things that we've done, but it's cool, especially when you try something different like that. And I actually think that I want to say it was Masters Week. Me and Dan kind of did something similar. I don't remember what game it was, but it was the same weekend, and we had some fun with it and played some music in there and kind of, we're more soft about it. It's a cool way to do things. Right. And I think actually some people mimicked you as well, which is kind of cool. Right. So there's some mimicking that took place in other sports along the same line.
Right.
My biggest thing is this. If we talk about like just the aspect of being a broadcaster and play-by-play, Last year at this time, I was actually in Irvine, California. I was doing the UPSL National Finals. 2 weeks prior, I had found out that I was type 2 diabetic. So on the 19th of January, so just over a year ago, I found out that I was a diabetic. And I was taking much new medicines that I wasn't, I had never taken before. I'm not someone that was taking a medicine on a daily basis, but now as part of my new journey, my new medical, lifestyle, like what you want to call it, I have to take medications on a daily basis. And at that time, my doctor and I had a conversation about me starting an injection, not insulin, but an injection. But we agreed that I would not take it till I got back from my trip. Right. So I was going to take other medication leading up to it. So I started to do that. And I hopped on a plane, went to Irvine, California on a Thursday, arrived on a Thursday, and then the first game was on a Friday. So I had all day Thursday and then Friday. I get up Friday and I have a little bit of a sniffle. I'm just, like a little congested, and that's usually from when you get on a plane. The games are going to be happening that night. So do the games. And for the most part, the games are okay. And then I wake up and we find out there's a whole bunch of rain coming into California on Sunday. So they decided to move the finals from Sunday to Saturday. So they moved them up a day. I wake up on Saturday morning and I can't get out of bed. Like I am so just not. And then when I do get out of bed, I have to go. I'm nauseous. I have to throw up. So I have the stomach bug. I am just not feeling good. I remember I texted the UPSL, my contact at the UPSL. I was like, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I have been throwing up all morning. And they're like, John, what do you need? I go, I'm going to need, Gatorade. I'm going to need a whole bunch of, things, maybe some Pepto. I'm going to just start bringing me, whatever. And they go, cool. Do we need to put like a plan B in place? I go, I would put a plan B in place. And right around like noon, I started to kind of feel better. Like I didn't feel nauseous. I had not thrown up for a couple hours. I was still tired as hell, but I wasn't feeling the same way. So I was feeling a little better. So I was like, hey, I think I can give this thing a go. They're like, okay, cool. Because the first game was at 3. And the second game was going to be later at night, like around 7. Maybe they were earlier. Maybe it was like 4 and 7. I don't remember the exact times, but they're like, cool. So I got an Uber. I went to the stadium, and I got dressed and whatever, and I took some Advil, and I was sweating out whatever I was feeling, right? And we get to the first game, and keeping in mind that both these teams had played the day before, right? So they all 4 teams had played on Friday, and now they're all playing again on a Saturday. So that keeping that in perspective. During the final, I said that both these teams look lethargic. These teams don't look as fresh. I alluded to that number of times. I alluded to the fact that a U19 team, mainly made up of players from 16 to 18, were playing up against grown-ass men. I alluded to that as the broadcast. And the reason why is in hang on one second, I'll show this to you. So, and I want to show this. I think it's important to paint this picture. So this here is my, I use this when I take notes on teams, right? So I have a notebook here that I've kept for the last couple of years. And these are my notes I take when I have made phone calls with teams. And so last year, no different than any other year that I do this, I had a conversation with both teams, or all 4 teams leading up to the final, right? So, and I do this with every team that I'm going to be meeting with, or not every team, but I do it with any team that's being part of this. So this is UPSL finals, all right? You keep track of my notes again, and the teams. I talked with all the teams, and they told me, all 4 teams talked about their strengths, their weaknesses, just like when you do, right, too, Nathan? I mean, when you had these conversations, and they all told me during my conversations with them, they all told me that youth, whatever, the trying to get the energy, all these different things. And so during that broadcast, I'm talking about like lethargic. I'm talking about the youth, and I kept getting text messages during the game. Stop talking about how tired they are. Stop talking about the youth of the game. Stop talking about the. I'm sitting here going, why am I getting like? I work at Oakland University. I work for ESPN Plus. I don't get my bosses at Oakland ever text me, please don't talk about that. I've never ever. But here I am.
No.
I'm getting these. Stop talking about the fact that they're younger. And so I get through that game, and afterwards they're like, John, we'll talk to you. You know, they come up to me and they're like, we're not happy. I go, what aren't you happy about, man? What am I missing here? Well, you kept talking about how young they are and how they're tired they were. I go, guys, they didn't have a day rest. The viewer at home, it was a sloppy game. I said this game lacked energy, and one of the people at the UPSL was like, John, you don't hear them talking about over in the Premier League about how I go. I don't know why we're comparing the UPSL to the Premier League. I don't know why we're doing that. I mean, if you want to compare this, what league you want to compare this to? We can compare it to USL League 2. We can compare it to any other amateur league in the country. But to sit here and say
sorry,
that
the major the major media is not going to get on your son or daughter if they're not producing in big games.
Like it's the way that it went down though. The reason why I said this is that I hindsight being 2020, I probably should not have called those games. I probably should have taken myself out of the equation and just rested and not done those games. It was my third UPSL national final, right? So I had done one the one before that, and then this was like a routine thing for me. But they did not like how I called that game. And to be fair, my relationship with them since then has been kind of, I would say, it's okay. It's been good, but to the level that it was, it's almost as because again, they felt like I didn't give that the national finals. They even said to the point that the national finals that I did do, that the Spanish version was a better version, so they went with the Spanish version for replays. And I was like, that really, like, I mean, like, because I used the word lethargic, and then said that this game lacked energy, like. Yeah, I struggle with it. I've always tried to be in my play-by-play, Nathan. I've always tried to be an honest steward of the moment. And the game was a terrible game, and I couldn't say it was terrible. You know, we talked about how there was rain coming in. That's why they moved the games up. There's a possibility the games on Friday didn't even happen. Possibly couldn't have happened because there was water all over the field, and the stadium was all about, not letting us do these games possibly. So there's a lot of things, that outside factors that played into all this, but it was a big deal.
Yeah. And it's always it's like how you say things. If you say it a certain way, people are going to have an issue. If you say it this way, people won't have an issue. And to honesty in what we do, and it's tough because people think they can control what we can say, and that's the thing that drives me the most nuts. You can say this, you can't say that. It's like, okay, well, I know where the line is, right? But if there is, in my mind, the biggest thing is you have to call the game honestly. Like if we don't call the game honestly, I'm no different than a cheerleader. Go get me some pom-poms and I'll go stand on the sidelines if you really want to see that. But that's not who I am. That's not what I do. So it's amazing. And the other thing we're always, and I'll close with this, it's always tricky for what we do is we're always dancing around this new societal norm, which is everybody gets so damn offended by anything remotely critical of their son, their daughter, themselves. We deal with this in minor league baseball all the time. And obviously I've dealt with it in soccer and the other sports too, but you get sometimes prima donnas who are in situations where they're not producing, or maybe they do look lethargic, or this, that, or the other thing. And you just try to call the game honestly. And sometimes that's going to not necessarily land you in hot water, but some people just aren't going to appreciate it. So I don't think you did anything wrong. I just think,
well, whether I did wrong or not, I don't even look at it like that. Though. I don't even look at it like that. I don't even look at it like I did anything wrong. I don't look at it that way. I mean, Yeah, no, I just think like anything else, and I know you weren't saying anything by that. I'm just saying that I don't know if I personally look at it as if I did anything wrong. Obviously, to the customer, which in this case is the UPSL, they weren't happy with how I delivered the broadcast. So, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? I mean, the viewer at home matters, but to be fair, the viewer is the viewer. I've gone through what I thought were worse games, and they loved what I did. Right. So, in our perspective too, we're like, oh, I didn't do a very good job there. Right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but we love what you did. So you're kind of come back. Right. So that's the thing that I always I struggle with. Jimmy comes in and says, I've heard a lot of calls that mention energy levels, teams on 2 days rest after traveling halfway across Europe. Again, that's why and this has happened quite a bit. With specifically with my agreement, my relationship with the UPSL. Whenever we've done a broadcast with them, there seems to be like this inward information kind of thing that comes in where during a broadcast where they're saying, "Hey, don't say this, do say this," or whatever. And I'm not saying that that's not uncommon. I get that. Usually, it's either before the game or it's after a game. It's not usually in game that you receive information, but. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. And I want that to be clear. Like everyone is going to handle their things differently. And obviously every league wants to have like this way that they see their league and how their league is going to be, the perception. We just want to make sure. I just don't like in the middle of a game being kind of like led down a path that I don't want to go down. And now you're trying to second guessing what you're doing, what you're saying, and that can have an impact on the rest of the game. So that's the reason why I brought that up, is because there are moments that I've struggled in this environment, and that was one of them. And but to each their own. But that is episode number 19. It's in the books there, Mr. Wangler. And we appreciate everybody who's tuned in and been a part of this for the last 19 episodes. Episode 20 is coming your way here on Monday. Right here on the National Soccer Network. I want to thank everyone that tuned in. If you subscribe, like us, share this with your friends and family. And Nate, what do you have here before we send this one home?
I thought it was another great week. I thought it was another good episode. Kind of like JT said, if you like the show, rate it. Let other people know. Continue to come back. Continue to drop your comments in. Again, despite what we're talking about, when you guys have good comments, we like to kind of circle back and talk about what you guys have to say, because I think it's good. I think it's nice to open up the dialogue to everybody else that's in the comment section. So continue to come back. Continue to support. Obviously, we're going to continue doing what we do, whether that's live sports or coming back here chatting every Monday through Friday. So, just continue to support. And obviously we love, Peter and Jimmy and everybody that's been with us consistently. So we'll just continue to build off that.
That's right. Well, everyone have a great rest of your Friday and an even better weekend. We'll be back at it on Monday, same time, same place, right here on Inside the Game.